Hey everyone, it's Anime Reaper coming at you with another What If Naruto Found Out About Uzumaki Clan at a Young Age, Part 4. This fanfiction was written by Dreener. If you like this what if and want more like it, please like and subscribe to my channel and don't forget to check the description and leave a comment down below. Without further ado, let's get started. Nico Uzumaki, after 3 days. She felt exhausted, that's the only thing she felt. Her legs felt numb, her skin was irritated everywhere. She would catch up on blood every few hours. Nico made sure her daughter wouldn't see her. But she knew her face was getting paler. Her red hair had started losing its color. They had begun becoming gray, losing their pigment. She couldn't understand why all this was happening. Horrible people destroyed her homeland, they were a peaceful clan. But it seems in this world people didn't care. As long as they viewed you as an enemy and not an ally, you needed to be destroyed despite fighting only when they were threatened. Nico could still remember her home, and it was the most beautiful place in the world. She had escaped along with her parents and a friend of hers. Her parents died shortly after they found a peaceful place to call home. Rijo Uzumaki is her friend, then her lover and then her husband. He was all she had for some many years. Their love grew when their family grew. Her daughter, Ashura Uzumaki. Or as Rijo liked to call her, his Ruby. Nico didn't know why he called her like that, but Asha always liked when Rijo called her that. Nico was sure that she had found her new home, she had a family that she loved. But people still remembered the Uzumaki clan. People still remember their abilities. Nico felt multiple people coming towards them. She swallowed a huge breath, she was scared, but for her daughter. Not herself. I won't let these monsters take my baby, Nico thought, angry. She clenched her teeth and took all her courage. She grabbed Asha's hand and put her to hold behind her back. Nico glanced at her daughter. She knew her tiny Ruby was scared. Just hold tight, my baby. I will protect you, she promised and started jumping from tree to tree. The ground was still muddy, despite that she stopped her jutsu 3 days ago. As they made their way, she felt a kunai flying towards them. A chain quickly came out of her hand and blocked the blade. But she knew whoever threw that wasn't alone. She felt her senses skyrocket. She promptly landed on the ground, avoiding a fireball jutsu that burned the tree she was standing on. Mama, her daughter screamed, scared. Nico looked around and saw herself getting surrounded by at least 20 shinobi. All of them were wearing masks. Nico knew they were Umbu, but she felt that something was off with them. Her daughter covered her face in her back, not daring to look at the shinobis surrounding them. She was crying. Nico narrowed her eyes at the Umbu. What do you want? She asked, her voice high. She was breathing heavily. Nico knew that she didn't have that long before everything was over for her. Come with us. Danzo-sama wants his weapons, one of the emotionless Umbus replied. His hand goes to a kunai on his jacket. Nico didn't know who the man was, but she knew from the way the Umbu talked. This man was dangerous and looked at them as weapons. She knew her chances of winning were thin. She looked behind at her daughter, who was still standing on her back. She covered her face. Nico gave her a sad smile before turning to the Umbu. I'm sorry, my Ruby. I'm sorry, Rijo. I have failed our family, she thought and started raising all her chakra left. She slammed her hands together. I won't let your monsters to hurt my daughter, she screamed, and the ground started shaking. One Umbu jumped from the ground to a tree and jumped in her direction with a sword in his hand. Ready to slice her legs. Nico felt a tear rolling down on her cheek. She screamed. Uzumaki style, chains of hell, she shouted, and hundreds of chains came out from the ground moving at high cage speed. The Umbu with the sword tried to swing at the chain. But he was quickly surrendered by chains. The others tried to run away but were quickly captured. And so was every shinobi around Nico. They tried to break free, but the chains were strong. They all were black chains, and some of them slightly shining. All of them couldn't get out, but they felt their chakra running lower and lower. One of them tried to hand signs but couldn't move his arms, not even a cm. They all had no emotions, but now they were looking at Nico with fear in their eyes. She took a deep breath and prepared to kill them all. Please no, one of them shouted, but the chains quickly ripped them apart. Their arms, legs and heads were ripped apart from their body. The sound of their bodies ripped apart was heard, it was a terrible sound. The blood fell in the muddy ground like rain. Nico slightly smiled, seeing that all of them had died. She looked behind her and saw that her red crystal was safe. She smiled for the first time since they were attacked. Is all right now, Asha? They're gone, she said gently. Her daughter slowly moved her head away, but Nico didn't let her look at the bodies. Asha looked at her mother, but then her hair slowly turning completely white. Kaa-chan. Your hair, she said, afraid. Her mother suddenly felt a massive pain in her stomach. She felt like something was ripping her apart. She fell to her knees and caught a tremendous amount of blood that completely covered her hand that she tried to stop the blood. No, so soon, Nico thought, knowing her time was gone now. She quickly put her hands on her daughter's shoulder and made her look at her. She kept breathing heavily, her throat dry. Her eyes felt dry too. Listen to me, Asha. I need you to go away now, she said as her breathing was getting worse. Her daughter quickly shook her head, and tears streamed down her cheek. No, I won't leave you. Not like Tio-Yu-chan. He told us to leave and now he's gone. I won't leave you, she shouted, crying and hugged her mother tightly. Nico wanted to speak again, but she could hardly breathe. She tried to but couldn't talk. Her words were stuck in her throat. Her sight was getting fuzzy. She soon felt herself hitting the ground. Her eyes looked at her daughter as she was looking down at her with tears in her eyes. Her tears fell on her face, but her whole body was numb. She could hardly feel anything. Sira, please take care of my daughter, Nico thought as her sight was getting fuzzier. Nico felt herself wanting herself to sleep. She felt more tired than ever before. She looked back at her life, what she had accomplished. And she had done nothing. I couldn't protect my homeland. I couldn't defend my parents. I couldn't save my husband. I never found Kushi-chan. She thought about her friend. Will I see you soon? She asked herself. She then remembered that her life wasn't a complete failure. Her daughter. The best thing that ever happened in her life. I failed to protect my daughter, she thought and wanted to cry. She looked up at her daughter again. Her red hair was shining because of the light of the moon. Be safe, Asha. I know you will survive, she thought, and felt herself losing the feeling of her body. She couldn't feel her legs anymore. She felt a tear rolling down her right eye. She then heard a voice calling to them. She saw her daughter looking in a specific direction. Be safe, Ashura. Uzumaki style, Chains of Hell, S rank to SS rank if used with Sage Chakra. Cost, the life of the user of the Jutsu. Chapter 8, Uzumaki Clan. After 3 months. Hiruzen Sarutobi was doing his usual paperwork, but he could hardly do it. His mind was on Naruto. The boy was a genius, but at the same time, he was too smart for his own good. The boy loved to read, which pleased Sarutobi's heart. It made him happy, but the last time he visited Naruto in the orphanage, he could see him not being happy about something, and his bright face was gone. The old Hokage opened the door, written "Demon" in the front and around the wall near the door. It broke his heart to see it. People were stupid and couldn't understand that Naruto kept the Kyuubi from breaking out and killing everyone. He sighed and walked inside. Naruto was reading the same book as last time. The Art of Fuinjutsu Part 2 and 3. The third was happy that Naruto liked to read, and he seemed to have a knack for Fuinjutsu. Naruto, my boy, how are you doing? Sarutobi asked, smiling at his surrogate grandson. Naruto's eyes went to the old Hokage. He knew his Jiji was coming 3 minutes before he came here. He could also feel the two Umbus outside the orphanage. I'm fine, Jiji, Naruto replied and ran and hugged him. Sarutobi gladly returned the hug, but when he pulled away, he could tell Naruto was forcing a smile on his face. Naruto, is something wrong? He asked, wanting to know if anyone had hurt him. Naruto frowned and took a step back. He glanced at the book he was reading. Jiji, can a living being be sealed? He asked, holding his hands together behind his head. Sarutobi felt tense. Has been a long time since he had been so nervous. He wondered if Naruto was asking out of curiosity or knew about the seal in his stomach. But in the same, he knew Naruto would need to unlock his chakra to see the seal. Naruto was looking at him, almost like judging him. Hiruzen took a deep breath and looked at the blue eyes of Naruto. Yes, he answered and noticed his eyes widened slightly for a split second and immediately turned to normal. Naruto's eyes lowered somewhat. Oh, he whispered, but Hiruzen heard him. Can you help me to unlock my chakra, Jiji? He asked with hopeful eyes. Sarutobi wondered if that would be a smart move. He was still too young. Naruto, I would want you to have a normal childhood and be a child longer, but that will never happen the moment Minato sealed Kyuubi inside of you. A normal childhood was gone, Sarutobi thought. I will help you, Naruto, but not today. How about next time I visit you? He asked. Naruto looked confused but nodded his head in agreement. It had been 1 month since that day. He was sure that Kakashi would appreciate teaching little Naruto. After all, he had asked a few times by now to help him unlock his chakra when Hiruzen informed him of Naruto studying and wanting to unlock his chakra. Sarutobi sighed and decided to write a letter to Jiraiya. Naruto. He was rereading a book about Fuinjutsu, and he liked how it worked. But at the same time, he was getting frustrated. He wanted to try himself to do some of the seals, but he couldn't do anything without unlocking his chakra. His Jiji had given him a few scrolls and a brush to try Fuinjutsu. He was sure he was doing seals of level I, right? Simple storage seals to storage kunai or shuriken or maybe a sword. But he still couldn't prove it, and he needed chakra. Thinking about seals made him think about the seal on his stomach. Recently had started growing red more often, he didn't know why and hadn't asked his Jiji why. But now, Naruto was sure that there was a connection between him and the Kyuubi. Is the Kyuubi sealed inside of me? Naruto asked himself and put the finger on his chin. The Kyuubi was a giant demon. Could a seal hold down the Kyuubi? Naruto asked himself. Does everyone else call me a demon? Except for Jiji, Godfather, and my friends, everyone else looks at me like I'm a demon, Naruto thought sadly. Like everyone else, he had heard about the Kyuubi attack on October 10th, almost 4 years ago. At that moment, Naruto remembered that his birthday was on the same day as the Kyuubi attack. His eyes looked at the calendar in the room, and today was October 3rd. He started breathing heavily and putting his little hand on his stomach. No, Naruto thought as hot tears were developing in his eyes. The looks of hatred Naruto said to himself and remembered them very clearly. Tears were now streaming down on his cheek and falling on the cold floor. No, Naruto screamed and fell on his knees, crying his heart out, holding his stomach with his hand. Why? Why? Naruto asked out loud at no one in particular. He sealed Kyuubi inside me. Naruto thought with wide eyes. Everyone always said that the fourth had killed the demon, but he knew now that was all a lie. When he had asked his Jiji, and when he received his answer, he thought he had some sort of connection with the Kyuubi, but now he knew. The demon fox was sealed inside of him. Naruto fell to the cold ground and hugged his legs. Hot tears are still on his face. Toad Jiji, please come here soon, he begged quietly. He stayed like that for a long time, he didn't know how long. All he could think of was, why him? Was he special? Suddenly he heard the rain outside. His eyes then went to look outside the window, and it was raining even more harshly now. The sound of rain falling on the ground and the roof of the orphanage could be heard. Naruto wondered why it seemed to always rain whenever he was upset. He walked closer to the window but couldn't clearly see. He then picked up a chair and climbed on it to have a better view. His eyes went on the two umbus hiding on the roof of a building close to the orphanage. He waved his hands at them, knowing they would see him. He then noticed that it had started snowing. Naruto was confused. Where was the snow coming from? He was sure it wasn't cold enough to start snowing. That does put a smile on my face, Naruto thought, looking at the snow. He sighed and decided to return to the bed. It was 5 p.m., and he was slightly tired. After 1 week. Naruto knew today was his birthday. Usually, birthdays were a day to celebrate, but not for Naruto. This day was his worst day. People around were even more hostile towards him, if that was even possible. Naruto was 4 years old. He had locked himself in his room. He didn't want to deal with other people today except if it was his Jiji or maybe his godfather, but he knew he would need to wait 2 more months for his godfather to return. Naruto sighed sadly and decided to read, but then he heard a poof in the room. He looked behind and saw a toad. It was almost the size of him. Naruto knew this one always brought him new books. He smiled. Thank you very much, he thanked him, smiling, and the toad smiled and went away. He noticed that it was 3 books this time. And to his surprise, all 3 of them were dark covered with a weird red spiral symbol in the middle. Knock. Naruto turned and saw the door open violently. The handle hit the wall. And he saw a woman glaring at him with fury. He knew that looked way too well. He was about to ask what was the problem when she just rushed at him and slapped him across the face. He felt his ears making weird noises on his head. His head had hit the floor and was bleeding slightly. The woman grabbed his hand and started dragging him away from the room. Naruto tried to fight back, but he was only 4 years old. His weak legs and hands couldn't hold anywhere. Soon he was thrown outside, and he hit the ground with his head. He put his hands where it hurt and looked at the woman still glaring at him. "You're old enough to live for yourself," she shouted with venom in every word. Naruto felt tears in his eyes, but not because of the pain in his head. "My books, please, they're the gift from my Togeji," Naruto shouted, and cried simultaneously. The woman only grew furious, but this time she just went inside and closed the door. Naruto shouted and ran at the door, trying to open it. "The books were the gift of my godfather. I can't lose them," Naruto thought as he kept trying to open the door, but in vain. "Please," he begged as he kept trying to open the door. Kakashi. It was the birthday of Naruto today. He hoped he could arrive in time. He didn't understand why he would have such a pointless mission. He was an umbu, for crying out loud. Kakashi soon arrived at the house with the scroll he was supposed to bring. He walked close to the door and knocked. He heard footsteps coming to the door. The door opened, and he saw a soldier wearing weird green armor. "How can I help you?" he asked with a monotone tone. Kakashi rolled his eyes and took the scroll from his pocket. "I'm supposed to give this scroll to your master," Kakashi answered, bored of this small village. After 6 hours, Hokage's office. Hiruzen, having gone through a long council meeting, the point of which he still had trouble comprehending, was annoyed at being pointlessly held back for so long. They were arguing and asking pointless things off of him that were beyond ridiculous in his honest opinion. Moreover, he still had to go and complete all the pending paperwork that must have piled up on his desk in his absence. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair as his back hit the leather of his chair. He inked his brush and started scribbling away at the stack of folders. He must have been at it for hours since the sun was beginning to set on the horizon, Hiruzen realized tiredly. The thought of not being able to see Naruto for his birthday. But he promised himself that tomorrow, at Ichiraku's, he would treat the boy and listen to all his babbles for the entire evening. Hiruzen had just about finished on his train of thoughts when Kakashi came striding in the door, an act that made Hiruzen grow a bit confused. "Mission accomplished, Hokage-sama." Kakashi sighed lazily, further confusing Sarutobi. "What mission is that, Kakashi?" he questioned as if the masked Jonin had grown a second head. "I don't remember assigning you any missions. Weren't you supposed to be watching over Naruto tonight?" he asked with a hint of worry while Kakashi looked at him perplexed. "But, Hokage-sama, the elders sent 2 umbus saying you were busy in a meeting." Hiruzen blinked, caught off guard. "Plus, this mission required my immediate attention. They even told me that they had assigned someone else to watch over Naruto while I was away." Hiruzen gulped thickly. "Kakashi, I never issued any missions of importance that might need your specific skill set today," he admitted with a dry throat. "And as for the council meeting, it was a useless gathering of civilians that really had no point in me attending." "What was this mission you were on anyways?" he asked dismally. "I was supposed to give a scroll to the land of tea. They gave me this scroll in return," Kakashi said, and pulling out a scroll. His words furthered Hiruzen's worries. Hiruzen's and Kakashi's minds simultaneously began connecting dots. The useless council meeting summoned by the elders and the civilian council, Kakashi's pointless mission, the umbu detail. Hiruzen stood up. "Kakashi," his voice turned desperate. "Please tell me that you made sure someone was assigned to protect Naruto while you were gone, didn't you?" he asked uncertainly. Kakashi mechanically shook his head, his lone eye widening as he too finished connecting the dots. Hurriedly, Hiruzen took out his crystal ball and desperately tried to locate Naruto. He looked and saw him cornered in an alley by 3 shinobi. Without another word, he left the office through the window with his battle armor. "Please be safe, Naruto." Naruto, 10 minutes earlier. He was walking down the streets after the sun had set, and he was wandering aimlessly, ignoring the glares they shot his way. He knew a few weak shinobis were slowly surrounding him. He would have run, but he knew he couldn't outrun trained shinobis. What confused him was that the 2 umbus that usually guarded him weren't there. Instead, a single umbu was looking in his direction. But Naruto couldn't feel any kind of emotion coming from him, almost like a piece of rock was instead of him. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Naruto was pulled into an alley, and he fell on his back. Regaining his bearings, Naruto saw 3 people donning the leaf's forehead protectors and flak jackets surrounding his way out the alley. Naruto's stomach dropped in dread when they pulled out kunai knives at him, and their smiles were downright evil. He had shivers running down his spine in fright at the vulnerable situation he found himself in. Naruto got up and dashed through an opening, zigzagging his way down the alleyways while the 3 men followed hot on his tail. Naruto knew they could have caught him by now if they so desired, being trained shinobi and all, but were probably enjoying the thrill of the chase. They were giving him some time, at the very least. Naruto tried to run even quicker when the men chuckled right behind him, apparently amused from his lame attempts at escaping them. Naruto suddenly came to an abrupt stop when he saw the alley come to an end, and all he had ahead of him was a wall, a dead end. Naruto turned around just as the men turned around the corner and took a step back, then another, and another when his back hit the wall. The shinobi began laughing at his sad face when Naruto's back hit the wall, and his eyes misted over with unshed tears. A lone tear rolled down his cheek when the men took out shurikens, not the practice one he was used to seeing, but the real deal. Without any hesitation or remorse, they chucked a volley of them towards him. 2 shurikens lodged themselves in his right thigh, and one in his left, another once in each of his forearms, and a vicious scream in agony tore through his throat. Naruto fell to his knees, whimpering in pain while they laughed at his misery. "How the mighty have fallen," one of them taunted. "So, how does it feel to bear the pain that you inflicted on so many other humans, Kyuubi? We know that we can't kill you, or you'll regain your strength and be free off your bonds, but we can torture your vessel and break you from the inside out. Don't worry, and you'll soon be numb from the pleasure we'll inflict upon you." He could feel the hatred coming from them. "Why?" Naruto whimpered dizzily. "Why do you people keep hating me? What have I ever done to you?" The man looked even more furious. "What did you do, you say, Kyuubi?" They sneered furiously. "You killed so many of our villagers, and now you have the gall to ask what you did. And to top it all, you ask what you did?" As soon as those words were said, Naruto glared back, his eyes slowly turning red, his whiskers showing more, his nails slowly growing, and his seal started glowing red like blood. "I'm not Kyuubi, you fools," he shouted as red chains began coming out of his chest. The red chains quickly went flying and wrapped all 3 shinobis. Their legs and arms were tightened, and none of them could move. "Let us go, demon," one of them screamed and struggled to break the chains. Naruto's eyes were red like blood. The chains only tightened around them. Soon they started screaming in pain as bones were broken and shattered by the chains. Naruto could hear the snaps sound coming from the bones. The shinobis were feeling weaker as their chakra was getting lower and lower. Naruto had 8 chains coming out of his chest, and slowly a 9th one came out and flew towards one of them and pierced him through the chest. The soldier fell to the ground, and at that moment, blood came out of his mouth. He was struggling in the ground, coughing blood, and trying to stop the blood, as he was drowning in his own blood. Naruto felt like he now was awake. He looked at the dead body in fear and sadness. Tears in his eyes as he couldn't believe what he had just done. The chains quickly returned to his chest. "Die!" both of them shouted and threw shurikens at him despite the massive pain around their legs and arms from the broken bones. As this was happening, Naruto looked at his tiny hands. The blood had flown to his face and hands. "What have I done?" Naruto said to himself. He felt like a monster. What would Jiji think of him? What will Togeji think of me? Will they abandon me? Naruto asked himself, crying. The shurikens were blocked by an Umbu standing in front of Naruto. He could feel his Jiji was here now. The 2 shinobis were in the ground now. He looked up to see the older man looking at him sadly along with 2 Umbu near him. Naruto knew the old Hokage was talking to him, but now all he could do was look at his hands full of blood. Slowly everything started getting fuzzier, and the welcome darkness took him. Naruto opened his eyes to find himself in a dark corridor. He narrowed his eyes. "Is this hell?" he thought in disgust as he walked forward. He kept walking for a few minutes and stopped seeing some light at the end of the corridor. It seemed to pull him towards it. Time to find out what is at the end. With that thought, he walked again, stopping only until the end. It was a huge room, so vast it was that the ceiling was impossible to find. The floor was wet. He looked around, his eyes seeing black stone and nothing more. But the elephant in the room was a large iron-barred door with a paper that said seal. He gazed at the piece of paper, resignation written in his eyes. His azure eyes looked past the cage, looking for what he knew was in the cell. He was just waiting for the Kyuubi to open his eyes. Based on what he had read, Kyuubi was a being of pure hatred and evil. A mindless beast can destroy a scale he never dreamed of, but Naruto was skeptical when he read that. He might get to see it for himself now. A growl sounded from the cage, sending a breath of hot air into Naruto's face. Naruto steeled himself, despite the cage separating him from the beast within. An enormous red eye opened, causing Naruto to tense up. The eye looked at him as if evaluating him. The eye then started to rise, causing Naruto to look up at the massive form. The Kyuubi had orange, silky-looking fur, with black markings around his eyes connected to his, funnily enough, rabbit-like ears. The upper body was humanoid, including the hands. The lower body was like a fox, barring the 9 long swaying tails in the back. The fire was the closest thing they looked like. The red, slitted eyes looked him closely with a hint of malice. Naruto spoke first. "You're Kyuubi-sama," Naruto said, afraid but at the same time wanting to show respect. He knew the Kyuubi was the reason he was hated and why his parents were dead, but at the same time, even he wouldn't want to be inside a prison. The Kyuubi looked slightly shocked by the way the tiny human greeted him. "So my jailer has finally honored me with his presence," Kyuubi replied with a humorless chuckle at the end. Naruto nodded his head. "Why are you sealed inside me?" he asked, knowing from before that Kyuubi was sealed inside. The giant fox narrowed his eyes slightly and showed his teeth. "You don't sound surprised to see me here, but when you remember the number of books you read. I'm surprised you haven't died from a headache," Kyuubi said as he was slowly walking in front of the cage. All his tails could be seen. "As for your question, you should blame your father, the 4th Hokage who sealed me inside of you," he answered with anger in his tone and focused on seeing the brat's reaction. Naruto's eyes widened, and he quickly shook his head in denial. "My father is the 4th Hokage." He asked himself and started making sense to him. Why Jiji would care for him and why he visited him every month. Why Toad-Jiji care for him. Why a Sunin was his godfather. It makes sense, Naruto thought. He always felt like he had seen the 4th before, but he could never really remember where. Why would he seal the Kyuubi inside his own son then? He asked himself out loud and started hitting the ground with his fists. He didn't know whenever to hate him or love him for his sacrifice. But then Naruto thought that could not have been easy for him, and he couldn't just ask for someone else's baby. He kept quiet, just staring at the ground. Minutes passed, and there was nothing but silence. Kyuubi could see that the brat was coping with the fact that his own father cursed him in a life of loneliness. Naruto remembered his godfather telling him that his parents loved him more than anything, but he wondered if his father knew if he would be treated like this. He didn't know yet. Naruto slowly stood in his legs again and looked at the Kyuubi with bravery. "Why are you not afraid of me, brat?" Kyuubi asked, slightly interested. He smiled. "I would lie if I said that I'm not afraid, but I'm more brave than afraid," he replied. Kyuubi released ki at the brat. Naruto immediately fell to his knees trying to breathe. All his muscles were frozen, he could hardly move a finger. He felt as he would lose consciousness at any moment. Kyuubi smirked at seeing the brat on his knees. Nice try, Naruto said, panting, and his voice low, but Kyuubi heard him. "You're a brave kid. I will give you that," Kyuubi said, slightly impressed. "Why did you attack the village?" Naruto asked, trying to look brave. Kyuubi looked at him. "Because of the Damuchiha and their annoying Sharingan. I was sealed inside your mother. When she was giving birth to you, brat. A man with a Sharingan forced me to attack the village, not that I had anything against it," he replied with a grin on his face. "My mother was like me." Naruto wondered with widened eyes. Was she hated around the village like me? Naruto asked himself. Naruto clenched his teeth. "Who was my mother?" "Kushina Uzumaki," Kyuubi replied. Naruto now was sure that the last name Uzumaki wasn't just a random last name. He was convinced that it was a clan. Was she from a clan? Naruto asked with a firm tone. He wanted to have answers. Uzumaki clan. The clan from Uzushiagaku. They were known for their red hair and their abilities in Fuinjutsu, and they had a long lifespan. They were close with the Senju clan, Kyuubi replied with a hint of respect. Despite hating them, he knew they were not like the others. And their strength was something not to take lightly. Naruto's eyes widened at that. He never thought he came from any clan, and now he was related to the Senju clan. But Naruto asked himself. If that's true, Why couldn't I find anything about my clan anywhere? But from the way Kyuubi talked, he knew the clan wasn't around anymore. What happened to them? Naruto asked, afraid of his answer and taking a step back. I don't know exactly, all I know is that your mother mentioned a few times that Kumo, Iwa, and Kiri banded together and destroyed them. He responded and wondered if this would bring hatred in his heart. Naruto was saddened. Everyone from his clan was gone, his parents gone. He was alone in a village that hated him for something he had no control over. He knew he had his godfather and Jiji. He quickly raises his head high. I will bring the Uzumaki clan back. I won't let it be forgotten, he promised with a high tone and with a smile and with a fist on his heart. Kyuubi looked impressed by his promise. For a second, he felt like his father was smiling at him instead of the brat. He wondered if the brat was who his father talked about. Why are you still here? Kyuubi asked, interested in why the kid was still here. Naruto swallowed a huge breath. He looked at the Kyuubi in the eyes, almost like he wanted to challenge him. Because I want to be friends. Naruto is paired with Fu, Yujito, and Osi Uzumaki girl. That all for what if Naruto found out about Uzumaki clan at an early age. Part 4. If you like this story, please show your support by liking the video and subscribing to my channel, and also show your support to the author by hitting the link down in the description. Thanks for listening, and until next time.